one client asked me that exact question.
Yep.
And I said, okay. They said, you got a tax bill coming up? He said, yes, I got a $30,000 tax bill. You know, and I said, I think you should put it all on credit card. I have a number of clients that they're hardworking consultants and they outsource this to their partner, and then they go and they buy $10,000 tickets in business class to go to Italy. You know, and it costs 20 grand for 2 people. You know, I said, well, why don't you do it this way? It is free. And they're saying, like, well, what do you mean it's free? I said, no, it's free. The number one thing is that to invest in yourself. I mean, you sell your soul to other companies, and I see this all the time with the employees that I work with, these large corporations. They're attracted to the benefits and the familiarity, but they've already kind of sold their soul. They're making other people rich instead of themselves. People don't buy from companies, they buy from people.
Roger Kleckner is the guy who walked away from winning inside one of the most powerful companies in the world so he could build a life he actually owned. He was employee number 112 at Oracle, rose through all the ranks, earned Oracle's worldwide MVP award for technical sales support, led massive enterprise accounts, and hit golden circle status again and again. Most people would have stayed at Oracle for life. Roger didn't. He left the comfort, the prestige, the guaranteed track, and went on to build and scale more than 8 different companies across different tech markets. He launched a global media and entertainment ERP firm, opened offices in London, Vienna, and Sydney, and negotiated enterprise deals across 6 different continents with companies like Microsoft, the BBC, Warner Bros., Nike, McDonald's, and Hewlett-Packard before successfully exiting and shifting into advisory leadership. And then he did something even more unexpected. He built My Miles Guide, turning travel strategy into a freedom engine. Traveled to 65 plus countries, made over 200 trips to Europe, hasn't paid for an airplane ticket in more than a decade, and has saved more than $1 million in travel, not by spending more, but by thinking differently about value, about systems and leverage. This conversation is about how you go from a performer to an owner, from being rewarded for output to being rewarded for the outcome. How you take elite level sales and leadership skills and turning it into actual freedom, optionality, and a life designed on purpose. If you've ever wondered what it's really like to just completely walk away from the safe path and build something that's actually yours, you're gonna wanna watch this all the way through. Roger Kleckner, welcome to the show. Cool. Well, Roger, you could have stayed at Oracle for life. You walked away from a dream career. Why did you choose that path?
You know, working for the large corporation and being part of this growing entity, I was with them for a number of years, and they were growing 100% per year. And I just felt like I was like a small drop in an ocean, and I wanted to make a bigger difference. And the entrepreneurial life seemed to be more suited for me. So I felt better about that. There was a lot of stress in working with Oracle. And so I just wanted more control of my life, and that's what kind of started me leaving them.
Yeah, like what was the work and stress like there?
Oracle paid a lot of money, but they demanded a lot. And so the expectations of, I was in sales, and so my quota doubled every year, and my territory and region went down by half every year. And so I had to continue to be on the treadmill to try to score more points, more areas.
That's not typical in the sales space, is it?
Well, with a company like Oracle, it's during its early days, and so they were on the verge of going public. I was with them when they went public. And, so there was just a lot of pressure on everyone to produce, and there were shareholders and being a publicly traded company and so on. And so there was they really put the screws to you to make it. So my quality of life was going down. I was on airplanes all the time. My record was I was on 14 different airplanes in 1 week. And so I would wake up in cities that I wasn't sure what city I was in. So it was just a lot of that activity, especially for like relationships and family and everything else. Yes, I was a single person at the time, which was fine, but then I couldn't move on with my life and do other things. So I wanted to have relationships and other things.
No, definitely. Was there like a specific moment where you knew that you had to move on, or was it just kind of gradually over time?
It gradually moved on when other people were kind of interested in me as a life past Oracle. And so I consciously made a choice to take less money, but have more of a quality of life. And then I started to build off that. And the truth is I started to be more happier. And so happiness is kind of like what I'm all about now. And it's about having good relationships and good people and people around and friends and so on. And so it's like, that was important to me. So I just made a choice in my 20s that that's the kind of life that I wanted to lead.
Interesting. So you kind of like, you got to a point where it was just like stressing you out so much, just like a lot of pressure, that you started taking a step back, and then you realized that you want to move on to something else after that.
Yeah, and I kind of moved on to something else. And so it's with a smaller company because, it was a lot with the travel. I was, traveling all the time, and I wanted to kind of like settle roots down a little bit. So it was with another company, it was less travel, but I was still involved in sales, but I also improved my skill sets to not being one person or one area. I did well, I was one of the star performers there, but it was just kind of like I wanted to turn a new page.
Definitely. And talk to me about that transition and then into owning your own company from sales.
So when I left, I went with some other companies that were Oracle adjacent. So they were selling applications that were based on Oracle. And to the large organizations, and it's because I had the relationships at Oracle. So I was responsible for half the federal government at the time. So I did a large deal with the Department of the Army. So that was a very large deal. But then I got extra monies and bonuses and so on. So I started to earn as much money as I did when I was working with Oracle. But then it's like the stress was half the stress. I could focus on larger deals. Then I started going down to like Boeing Aircraft and Sears and Roebuck and a lot of large companies at the time. So that was gratifying for me because I had more control of the entire process. Also, when you start to go from being a salesperson to be an entrepreneur, there's other things you need to consider, like financing and monies and how you spend your time and how do you do all these different things. So for me, it was a learning experience. Yes, I went to college and did stuff, but it's like, how do you run a business? So that's where my focus was always going, and that kind of made me more happier. I happen to be more happier with smaller startup companies, and so I like that entrepreneurial process. It's kind of like a dog chasing a car, and when I catch the car, I don't know what to do with it. So then I get bored after a while, and I need to upset the chess pieces on the board to have a different set of experiences to try something else. And that's why I kind of hit into some different areas of founding different companies in different areas to find my success in those areas.
Yeah. And while you're figuring out like the game of chess, I guess the game of business, what do you feel like were the biggest learning curves transitioning from sales into running your own business?
The number one thing is that to invest in yourself. I mean, you sell your soul to other companies, and I see this all the time with the employees that I work with, these large corporations. They're attracted to the benefits and the familiarity, but they've already kind of sold their soul. They're making other people rich instead of themselves. So if you can take a step back sometimes, yes, there may be a short period of time that you're investing in your education to learn how to invest in yourself so that you make the benefit of that once you start your entrepreneurial thing, because it's all about your personality. And if a person is in sales, they already have the relationship skills so they can connect with other people. So that's transferable across multiple industries. And that's what I found is that people do business with the people that they like and they trust. So that's what was always imperative for me, is to make sure that I was straight with my clients and to make sure that what I was telling them was accurate and truthful. And I always felt that was a good weather vane for me to move forward in my career.
100%. Yeah, it's kind of sad. A lot of people sell themselves short for the short-term gain and don't go through and look at the longer-term horizon, even though you can go through and learn a lot and like build up your accolades and whatnot within a company. But at the end of the day, you are selling your soul to a company, a person, a facade, a dream, a framework that was sold to you by someone else. When you talk about education and like stepping into like that space to go through and cut through the learning curve of running your own business, like what does that mean exactly? Like, are you going through and hiring coaches? Or are you going like back to college, or like what does that mean? Because I think when people hear that traditionally, like they think, oh, I need to go back to college. But I don't think that's how it is.
No. So it's interesting because I said I went to college and got a good degree, a technical background, and so on, and so that's just the foundation. That's just the baseline of an education. But you don't really start to get an education until you get out into the workforce. And then once you're in the workforce, it's like you have to learn from your own mistakes. And to say, it's like, okay, well, that didn't work right, let's not do that again. So let's try to do something that's a little bit more productive. And a lot of it is trial and error. You can try different things. Don't be afraid to fail. Because if you can fail, you can do things, but you have to be able to learn from your mistakes. And always being a good person representing yourself is you have to be able to dust yourself off if you fall down to get back up again and get in the fight the next day. And so then you always try to gain knowledge on other people's dimes. So a lot of people work for a lot of companies and they get to learn from that, and they try to experiment in different areas to just get the exposure, the experience of the industry that they're in, the products they're in, also presentation. If they offer sales training or curriculum, take everything, learn everything you possibly can, but then adopt it or adapt it to what you're intending to do. Now, the other thing is that I have joined other groups like Vistage and like EOS communities, have other consultants kind of come in, and we've had some success with that. But it always comes back to is that I feel I'm about as smart as the guys that are also counseling me, especially for the small business. Mm-hmm. There is no golden ring or golden ticket that some other person is going to tell you how to run your business. So focus yourself on your core values or your core expertise and try to build off of that. So put more of your investment in yourself and the trial and error method instead of outsourcing to other people to tell you what you should be doing.
100%. So doing it yourself first, and then it sounds like more investing into talent, like having people like on your team working for you.
Yeah, when I started to build up, and some of the companies that I founded got up to be about 60 employees. Wow. And so I had to, that was over, well, it was through we kind of acquired another company, and I became president of that company. So so it's like, over 4 or 5 years.
Wow.
And so, but you have your goals, and then what you always try to do is hire people that are smarter than you. Mm-hmm. So if, I have certain skills, but it takes me 3 times longer to do something that I'm not necessarily good at. So like accounting, I'm in the revenue generation business. I don't like the accounting business. I understand it. I got an MBA, I got all this other stuff. But then it's like if you hire other people that they're actually better at that than you are, and to be able to acknowledge that. I don't have to be the smartest person in the room. I say it's like I want to be the dumbest person in the company and hire everyone in the company that's smarter than me. They just all report to me, and so that's what I found out is the positive thing of running a business is to help other people achieve their goals, but their goals are different than your goals. It's like, how do you be a team player and how do you work with these other people? But definitely hire smart people because they're smart enough to figure stuff out.
Mm-hmm. And this is one thing Alex Ramosi talks about, and a couple of my other friends that have transferred from sales into like owning their own businesses. I think a lot of people struggle with is when you are trying to go through and get that top talent, like they need to be able to follow you. Like there needs to be a reason that they're able to follow you. For a sales rep that's going through and trying to start their own company and bring on talent like that's top level talent, that's much smarter than them, what advice or recommendations would give to them to attract that top level talent and get them to stay and like look up to them?
A lot of times people, when they're trying to join like a small entrepreneurial group, a lot of times the people start off as that they're friends or they work together or they have a good positive working relationship. And they're willing to go along to say, it's like, as long as they're getting paid or they're doing what their job is try to help you invest in your goals. And it feels like a teamwork. So the key is that you can't make it all about yourself. You have to make it about the team, that the team wins, and so that's what we try to do is to make sure that everybody has a little stake in the game. The other advice is that people give away things too early because you don't know where the company's going to go, whether it's going to succeed. So some people give away stock options. And now I help other companies and other people to talk about that because some people, they get in a jam because the company's now grown, but they gave away too much at the beginning, and now they're earning actually possibly more than anybody in the company, but they're not doing the work. So what do you do about that? Then the other one is people have an issue about stock options. Stock options in a private company aren't really worth that much until you sell it. Most Sales are done by acquisition, where somebody's going to buy you out. And then, but you can use it as a carrot or incentive, but try to keep as much as possible. And then also other people try to do like angel investing, other people that they're investing in your company, and they give you a certain amount of money, like, $50,000, $100,000, $1 million. And then when you have this, it's kind of like, okay, well then you're already working for somebody else. Mm-hmm. So I'm a big believer in doing a shoestring budget to do things on the cheap, work out of your house. Don't go out and start, buying a bunch of equipment and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. Go out there and organize your company, find out how you do things, but also how do you keep your costs low? And then also try to focus on particular clients that you already have an access to or a relationship with, to try to turn them over to you to make sure that you over-deliver under-promise and over-deliver. Mm-hmm. Because they're going to look at you, because they're going to give you the business at the start because they know you. There's a personal relationship between you and your clients. So that's where you typically start off on a business, but try to keep your expenses down, because the more you keep your expenses down, the longer your company's going to go. And try not to give away at the start unless it's a fair partnership.
100%. And I want to pedal back a little bit to like building out the team after you go through and keep costs low, like after you start building out the business a little bit more, just because I don't feel like it's something that's talked about a lot. Because you talked about making sure that they have stake in the game, making sure like they're incentivized, obviously that they're getting paid well, and that it feels like teamwork, right? As like you're going through and developing your team and your organization, are there specific like frameworks or things that you went through and implemented like in these companies, like with those like things in mind that like kept the like teammates there and kept it growing and kept it like competitive, if that makes sense?
It's interesting because you have salespeople and then you have the other people in the company. Yep. And then it's like, what you really need to pay attention to, what are the motivations? Mm-hmm. And so it's not all money based, because I came from a revenue generation sales thing. Yes, like when you're interviewing salespeople, said like, what do you want to do? He goes, I want to make a lot of money. That's the right answer that you want for sales. And he goes, I want to help you make a lot of money. I want you to make more money than I make. But you want to make sure that I've done a lot of compensation plans to help people to say, it's like there should be no caps on your compensation. It's like, look, if you go out there and you close $1 million deal, you're going to earn this amount of money. You close 2 million, there's how much money you're going to make. So you shouldn't be capping that stuff. You can renegotiate it later on or bring on more people. That's all fine. But you want your revenue producers to think there's an open field for them to go, because they're money motivated.
100%.
Other people are not. So if you have administration people, virtual assistants, or project managers, or other people, they want to have a steady life, and they want to be able to be able to work in an environment that feels like they're being satisfied, that it works well for them. A lot of times it's not necessarily money based. They want to just earn enough money that they feel good about themselves and what they're doing, but it's primarily the work environment that they're working in that it's not an environment where they hate to come in for their job. So you need to focus on those employees to make sure that when they come into work that they feel good about it. They feel good about what you're doing. They feel like you're an ethical company. They feel like you're doing positive work. So that is the motivation factor, and it's not necessarily money-based. The sales guys, you want them to just be out there ripping, to say, how can I make more money? Incentivize them to say, I'm going to go out there, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this, and then make sure they're compensated. Because as soon as you kind of slack off the compensation or try to cut it back, and then that deteriorates the relationship.
Oh, 100%. And for those specific people, like administrative assistants and like VAs and accountants and whatnot, like within the company, obviously like they're not money motivated. You want to create an environment that's comfortable for them, that they're excited to show up like every day. Like what are specific aspects of that you would like go through and like implement it in a company if you were to like start over again to create that environment?
Well, one is that you want to have enough meeting that they feel like they're involved and they're participating in the success of the country, that their opinions matter. So a lot of times is that you want to ask different people, especially in the management meetings or the group meetings, is to say, I want to hear your ideas.
Do you have that like quantified by chance from like your like previous companies?
It's I've been in positive and negative environments, but everything kind of stems from the management team. And the management team, sometimes if they're, if they try to separate themselves that we're the elite group and then you're everybody else, and then there's resentment between the team. You need to break down the barriers between the management from the person, the virtual assistant that's working part-time, all the way up to the CEO of the company. The key thing that I found is you make sure that everybody's opinions matter and that they feel heard, and it's not talking, it's listening. As long as you're listening to somebody and people feel that they had an opportunity to say that and you came to a consensus, and then they said, okay, this is the way we're going to go, this is what we're going to do, they feel like they had their voice and they had it heard, but most of the time there's resentment when people don't feel heard or they don't feel respected. So even if it's a person that's, let's say, like a virtual assistant, so as long as they're respected and they're treated with respect, then that's going to do a lot towards make sure that the harmony in your company is you're trying to minimize problems.
100%. And how did you go through and structure that? Like, did you make sure it's like on a weekly basis that they're like feeling heard, like daily, monthly? Were you doing like one-on-one meetings, or is it just kind of an open forum they could come to you? Like, how did that look like?
Well, there's two things. Like, one is that most companies don't know how to run meetings, and most sales managers don't know how to run sales meetings. And so what I find, well, if we take them in two different groups, so the salespeople, the area not to run a sales meeting is you go there and they talk about the wonderful things you did the previous week or the wonderful things you're going to do the next week. That you can get that out of your CRM system. He said the sales management's job is to help make all your salespeople successful. And the way you make them successful is it remove obstacles to their success. To say, hey, you're working on this one deal, what are you trying to do? And it's like, how can I help you? When do you need me to come in? How do you need to do this to help close the deal? But you need to make sure that there's a structure in place, that they understand the rules, that they understand where they're in their procurement process. What you're doing is you can create a sales process and to make sure they tick all the boxes as the deal advances. And then your job as a sales manager to make sure that they're doing that. Now, on the other people is that you want to make sure that, like I said, that they feel like they're invested. And that typically is that they just can hear what's going on in the company and other departments. And so something else may ring the bell. But also you have to have your door open just in case there's a crisis or an emergency, that they could walk in at any time and they could tell you something, but it shouldn't detract from your company to pull everything on course, but it's something that possibly could be addressed at the appropriate time, depending on the severity of the particular issue.
They have to be able to feel like they can come to you.
Yes, and also to say that, when you said, I'm so happy you did, so one is that it goes back to you can scold people in private and praise them in public. So you want to say, I want to do a special shout out to this person here. They got the cookies. The cookies went out to the client today. They're very happy about it. And goes, thank you very much. So you want to address people. You want to call them by their first names. You want to give them eye contact. So this is internal within your team to make sure that they feel respected and they feel liked. Likability is a big thing within your inner office about because you want to have a team that actually likes each other. And if there are some people that they're unsatisfied, you need to kind of get to the root of that, because it can be kind of a cancer that can kind of grow if they're complaining or if their issues are not addressed. But there's time and a place to address those particular issues, but most of that's done in private. So praise people in public in the meetings, but listen to people when you're in private if they want to bring something to your attention.
Definitely. Yeah, if you were to go back and do it all again with the first company, when you were transferring from sales to like owning your own business, what do you wish you would have done differently?
I wish I would have done it sooner.
Okay.
And which was what everyone would say. But to not take things too personally is like, as long as you're feeling like you're doing good, and it's like, do you need to it's like, what's the largest motivation that you have? Is it having money? Is making money? Is that the biggest thing? So if you had a trade-off to make money and be unhappy, or to be happy and make a little bit less money, what people would make that choice? And I just made the choice for myself. Is I started off in a very high stress, high performance when I was a district manager at Oracle, I was the youngest district manager by 10 years.
Jeez.
And then I was an MVP, and I was this shining star doing these things. I was the personal pre-sales person for Larry Ellison, so I knew him personally. I played basketball against him. So I had all these things that kind of happened at an early age that was beyond my years at the time. But was I happy? No, I was stressed out, and I didn't have friends because I would just show up, like at the end of the week. And so for me, it was more important for me to be happy. And so one is that you want your employees and your other team members to be happy as well, because that's ultimately is the end of the day what makes more sense is that you want a positive place for you to go to work and feel like you're making a difference.
100%. And obviously, as you go through and start like a business, like you have to go through and sacrifice that time, and like you'll be unhappy for a time. But what strategies did you go through and implement to protect that time and make sure that you're happy as you're kept developing these businesses?
Well, if you're let's say this, I think you're asking like if you're currently working for a company, okay, and you're thinking about branching off on your own, to start your own thing, it's to make sure that you nurture the relationships with the clients as much as possible. And so because people don't buy from companies, they buy from people. And so one sense is to know your skill sets, to know what you're trying to do, to know actually what you're selling, to know that you can actually deliver. And then so when you do that, you don't want to jump off the deep end or jump the deep end of the water cold, with no clients, no relationships, no anything. Say, hey, I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread. I'm going to put up a plaque and I'm open for business, and no one knows you're there. So you kind of have to kind of nurture things to make sure that you have a relationship, and maybe even have some trusted people that you trust to say, hey, look, I want to have a confidential conversation with you. It's like, if I were out of my own, and I was thinking about investing in this, do you think this is a good idea? This is when you start to invest in other people for other people's ideas. And it goes, but you also have to trust your own gut about whether you can actually deliver it or not. But the key thing is, are you happier? Because if you jump from out of the frying pan into the fire and it's just the same thing, and you got less money, you got no health care, and you got all these other things, it's like it doesn't make you happy. The second thing is that if you're married or if you have a family, and then there's a lot of risk with that, because you're putting a lot of eggs in one basket by jumping into a new business. You need to make sure to have a cushion that your family can understand what you're trying to do, and then work very hard at it. But try to get the first deal before you even leave the company, or do a little moonlighting at night to make sure that you're setting up the environment, whether it's in the same industry or adjacent to the same industry. Just make sure that you have a revenue stream kind of in place, that you're not jumping off cold. So don't leave your day job until your night job is starting to show some promise. And then also it's like, believe in yourself and invest in yourself that you can actually do this.
Yeah, actually plan your exit.
Plan your exit. Yeah. So when we started a number of the companies, that's always been one of the first big discussions, like, how does this end? It's like, how let's say this company succeeds, or let's say it fails. How does that go? We always want to try to remain friends as much as we can. That may or may not be possible, but it's kind of like, you want to make sure that what's the worst case, that you can pull out the contract. Nobody reads the contract until something goes bad.
100%.
So you want to make sure to read the contract that is very clear, and also to get all those questions up front. Let's say you die, well, what happens to your portion of the company? Let's say other partner wants to come in, what kind of equity? They're demanding equity. Well, what does that mean? So try to think of as much of stuff as about how the company would fail, because that's harder than if you thought about how it's going to succeed. Everybody says, yeah, we're going to start a company, we're going to go do this, it's going to be great, let's hire these people, let's get a bunch of new cell phones, but that doesn't necessarily reach your revenue goals where you need to be. So try to make sure that you have, they say good fences make good neighbors. And that's kind of like what it is that people kind of understand what their roles are. The second thing is that the roles of the company, you have to give people respect that they can actually be in charge of their department, of their issue, to have clear lines. Don't have two co-CEOs. Have one CEO, one decision maker. so that when it comes down to a vote of the management team, you can say, okay, here's the vote, here's what we're doing. So otherwise you're just building some animosity because it's confusion as to what roles people are playing within the company. If you're a project manager, this is how you're judged. This is the criteria that you're going to get at the end of the quarter to look whether you get raises or what have you. And it's like to understand the criteria to make sure they understand it. I'm a big believer when you have job descriptions of all the people in the company that you have a clear description of what they're responsible for to kind of eliminate the ambiguity, but also to understand how they're being compensated. If you're saying it's like I'm the greatest salesperson ever and I'm going to sell $3 million of new product in the next 6 months, great. And if you don't do it, then we're going to have an issue. Sign here so that they understand what they're trying to do. You understand how you're going to help them, what they're responsible for, and you want to try to get in front of any issues because you don't want to wait till the end of the month to find out that they didn't do any sales. You just lost a month. And so you want to check in with them all the time. How's that deal going? How's that deal going? How's that deal going? What obstacles are you finding? Have you thought about this? That's the purpose of the sales manager talking to the salespeople to make sure to help them. I think that's the biggest thing is that sales managers are just kind of like a parent, but the truth is that the sales manager should be there to help you. And they need to believe that you're there to help them, not to do their work because they need to have the responsibilities for what they're trying to do.
100%. They have to know that you're there, that you will help.
Yeah, and sometimes you do have to fire people. And I hate that, because you want people to succeed. And but if they've lost their way, but then this question is, whose fault is that? If you're the manager and you hired them and you say, okay, you're off on your own, you're on a commission structure and, come back, a year from now, tell me if you made any money. You didn't help that person, so that's basically on you.
100%. And how, when you have gone through that firing process, how did that process look like for you to make sure you guys are parting ways in a good position?
Yeah, especially when you're in certain industries where people show up in your same industry. So you always want to end it on a positive note, and to say, to point to the criteria to say, look, it's like I accept some of the responsibilities, but this is the criteria we set out to achieve in this particular period of time. Even if I give you some more time, are we going to achieve those goals? Is there even a plan to achieve those goals? Were our goals even realistic to achieve? And then it said well, we should have somebody else to see what else we can do, but this is no longer working for us. Yeah. So one is be honest with them, tell them the strengths, tell them how, take some of the blame for yourself, but to make sure that they walk away to feel like they were heard. And just can strike it up to say, well, it just didn't work out, and because it depends on what they say to other people. So if they go to another job and another job says, why'd you leave your old company? You want to know what they say. And what you want to do is to have other people go to the company goes, that's a really good company. It didn't work out for me, but I'd work for that company. If I was doing a project manager, I'd work for them. So you're trying to build positive things because it's also a recruiting tool. When you have other people that come join you, that you want other people to join the crowd because they're high producers. And that's what you want, is the high producers. And a lot of times, like at Oracle, there was an 80-20 principle. 20% got all the money, and all the accolades, the 80% got fired. So that's what I was wrestling with all the time, is that I had to keep going faster on the treadmill to be in that 20%, because otherwise I'd lose my job. And that's fine if you're in sales, but that's when you understand what the true criteria is, and you can decide on your own terms whether you want to get off the treadmill.
100%. And when you were going through and running your own companies and you're pretty much putting people in that 80-20 position, how did you know it was time to go through and let someone go, or start having those conversations? Was it they were way beyond hitting the mark, or what were the early signs?
A lot of times, and it varies by the different employees about their own self-perception of themselves. And so I'm not sure if it was a good management techniques, but a lot of times I told people where they were at in comparison to the rest of the employees in the company. To say it's okay, it was interesting because at first we started off in sales and we said, it's you're banging it out of the park. I had a salesperson in London, and I became the CEO. We merged up, and this salesperson was going to be, it was my new report to me. So I flew over to London to meet him, and he thought I was going to fire him. And I said, "Look, you're the highest producer in the entire company. What do you?" I goes, "I'm here to see what I can do for you."
Yeah.
And but other people is that to realize that you have your top producers and you have your lower producers, and your lower producers is that you don't hold a scythe over their heads. You say it's like, you need more help. There's some reason why they're succeeding and you're not. Let's focus on what you're trying to do. So one sense is to show that you're trying to invest in everybody. What I also found out, because I came from a technical background, we had a whole bunch of project managers and developers. And it turned out that our star developers that had the most quality code and the least amount of errors and they're highly productive, and then we started to rank the people to say, you're our star developers and you're kind of like average. And so then we'd set some initial goals. Well, it turns out those average people started to get much better. And then what we also found is our star producers, they doubled their output.
Wow.
So we had the same amount of cost for them because we didn't increase their salary, but their output, their productivity, and their quality of code doubled in quality.
That's insane.
Same is true with the project managers. And we told them where they were. We told them what the expectations of them to say, what else are you doing here within the company? How else we can help to turn that back over to the sales team. And the sales team, to pick that up, is that you give them compensation or you give them accolades to say that they did a good job because a lot of people don't think that sales is their job. The truth is sales is everyone's job in the company. And but it may just come in different formats or flavors.
100%. Those are really, really good points. For you, obviously you went through and developed like all these companies, then you shifted more into being the My Miles guy. Why did you go through and transition into that? And what's the passion behind it and the story?
Well, there were three major sections of my life, and I was fortunate enough because I was under some non-compete clauses. I had like 18 months that I couldn't work in my own industry, but I was getting paid for it.
Funny.
So I took 2 sabbaticals.
Wow.
And then the sabbaticals was that if I ever did not work, and this was in my 40s, young 40s, and to say, okay, well, could I be happy or what would I do? So I live in Colorado. I did a lot of mountain biking and skiing, and I found out that I kind of like this. This is pretty nice. But then the second part of that was to work for some other companies. So first I expanded my own companies to go international. We had offices in Europe and elsewhere, and I traveled a lot to travel to Europe. So I traveled over 200 times to Europe for business.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And then I started to say, okay, let me flip that around. Because of all the relationships I had with these other countries, Argentina, Germany, the UK, Ireland, Sweden, I was like, there's other companies that are trying to make inroads in the United States. And I said, I can help you here in the United States. So I was kind of the conduit of the person to see how I can start to pay it forward, how to help other companies to have it, because the threshold of how do you do in America. So I did get equity in those companies to help them here, to introduce them to the right people, and to tell them how America works. There's cultural differences if you're negotiating in Germany versus Canada versus the Netherlands versus South America, and the nuance of that is completely different. That's just part of my own exposure. So after I divested and I completely got out of that, then I had some flexibility, so I could have actually retired. So I tried that for like 6 months, and I said, okay, I'm going to try to retire, and that didn't go well.
Yeah.
So what do? I start 2 companies, but I wanted to make sure that the companies that I founded were companies that I truly was passionate about, and it became sort of like helping others. So the first company is Ascent Sales Advisors. I do like leadership sales management to help other startup small companies on how they should run their operations for sales, marketing, targets, compensation, all these other things. I help them to prepare for the growth of what they're doing as a consultant. I find that very personally gratifying to do. The second thing is it's my personal passion about travel. I travel with my family, and so I realized, because I was the guy paying the money when my employees are traveling, and then we had travel budgets and people flying and staying in fancy hotels in London and all this stuff. I was the guy paying for that. So I tried to make sure that I tried to reduce my cost. It's very important if you have a startup company or a new entrepreneurial thing is to make sure your costs are minimized. So I became a frequent flyer mile expert. And I do have a computer science mathematics background, so I just think that way. And I always thought it was like a giant puzzle. You know, it's a game, you know, and I hate those airlines. I hate them all, you know. But then I see how other people spend a lot of money and on loyalty and how many, you know, they have a 100-person seat plane and they have 110 people that have status, you know, and it's just, so then I started to figure out how to game the system, that I could do it for myself. And so then I got pretty good at it. So I've traveled to 65 countries around the world, across 6 continents. I haven't paid for an airplane ticket in over 10 years. You know, I've got millions of frequent flyer miles. But it's all about a strategy about how to earn miles for both individuals, but also for businesses to lower their travel costs for their entire company. So there's a strategy about doing this. So if you're a small business owner, you're absolutely ideal to have different areas about paying for things with credit cards instead of ACH or check, and then you're getting frequent flyer miles, and then you can take care of your families. What I noticed a lot of times is when you have small businesses, they're just starting a small business and they got a family, they got a wife, they got kids, you know, and then the first thing to go is their summer holiday. They used to go to Mexico for a week and they said, we can't afford it. You know, it goes, well, why don't you fly to Mexico for free and get all your hotels for free by using credit cards, leveraging your business to pay for all your personal travel. So now my family does all that. I kind of manage it like a wolf pack, all the points and things. So we travel about 3 times a year to Europe, and we travel in business class. And just because I found out how to search for award availability, how to help out, but also to invest in my family. You know, so one, you have your business, but then have your vacations, but just lower the cost out of pocket for your vacations. I have a number of clients that they're hardworking consultants and they outsource this to their partner. And then they go and they buy $10,000 tickets in business class to go to Italy. You know, and well, it's 20 grand for 2 people. You know, I said, well, why don't you do it this way? And it's free. And they're saying like, well, what do you mean it's free? I said, no, it's free. You know, and so the hardest part is people don't believe me. You know, so one, in working with them and to kind of show them the strategy about, you got a business, so how do you pay your taxes? You got kids in college. You know, it's like, okay, well, how do you pay their college tuition? You know? And so far over the last 10 years, I estimate I saved over $1 million in travel.
Wow. That's a lot.
And that's just my family. So the other people that I talk to, there are other people that travel a lot more than me. And so that they've said that I've changed their lives. So that's where I'm at now. You know, I got gray hair now, you know, and it's like I don't have a real, a job that I have to go to the office and do things, but I have flexibility so I can travel, but also I can encourage other people to dream bigger.
100%.
So there's a lot of great places to go in the world. I was in New Zealand a couple of years ago, so I know how to get there. I'm going to Japan later on. That's great, you know, so it's like, but especially if you have like a lifetime tour, you don't need to break the bank on that. You know, it actually is true you can do it for free, and then that's what I kind of count or tell people how they can do that, either from a consultancy standpoint, that is like, we have consultants that do travel for other companies, and what I do is I say, okay, they're going to get the invoice, but how do you fly first class while they're getting an economy ticket? Things like that. So I just help out people do things.
Definitely. I think a lot of people have a misconception about leverage, like leveraging credit cards. Obviously that's how you go through and like teach them what to do. What are like some specific golden nuggets that you would go through and give someone to start implementing today to like start getting some of those points back to book that flight to Italy or whatnot?
First, if people are listening to this podcast, and so the first thing is that I would have them open up their wallets and look at the cards that they currently use. The average person gets a credit card, they keep it for a decade, and they never even consider, does it still give them value for what they're trying to do? You know, I cringe when I go out to dinner with my friends and everybody throws down the credit card to split the tab, and I get to see what credit cards all my friends use. And it's like the ones that I throw down get 4 times the value as the one they do. So one thing is, it's just a lot about being smarter. a lot of people are taught from a financial standpoint is that just get one credit card, just use that one credit card, and that's what you should be doing. So don't get fancy. And for your business, have one credit card for your business, one credit card for your personal spending, and that's it. That's a myth, because you can get such outsized value for doing this. There was just recently a bonus for a welcome bonus that if you spent $150,000 in 3 months, which some of the people I talk to can, because they're paying their kids' college tuition, they're paying their taxes, they're paying their 1099 employees, and it's like, so all these things that you're spending money on, they can hit that 150 and they're going to get like 800,000 points. So that it's like, so for 800,000 points, that's about 8 round trips in business class to Europe and back. So why wouldn't you do that for free? So especially if you're going to spend the money anyway. So a lot of people are just spending money that would advise could just be spent differently. You're still going to spend the amount of money. And a lot of people ask me to say, it's like, well, how much do you spend, on a monthly basis for car insurance, for house insurance, for your business and travel and that kind of thing? And they say, some people say 5,000, some people say 15,000 or so on. And I say, it's like, well, if they do it, strategy, they can get like a free business class trip for their family of 2 or premium economy or whatever for a family of 4, that they could travel more and their travels could be free. So it's just, I'm trying to educate people that this is technically possible, and I'm example, and I'm no genius. I'm just saying, like, I have a strategy on how to do things a little bit smarter, and then finally the light bulbs turn on, and now I can't think of doing it any other way. Because to accumulate points is so much easier than it is to generate dollars. Most of the time to get a free round trip ticket on an economy class is $14,000 is what you have to spend on a credit card to get that money, okay? And then for $14,000, I can get 250,000 points on a credit card, and you could fly to business class multiple times. So where would you want to spend that $14,000? And it's like, I talk to people every week, and they're just shocked about doing this. Everyone also thinks that their credit scores are going to go down if they open up a couple credit cards, and actually it's called your capacity to spend. Your FICO score is going to increase. You're going to become better. The other thing I do is I talk to a lot of parents that have kids in college age. And I say, look, your kids' habits have completely different spending habits because they're in college, they're renting, they're going out to bars and restaurants, they buy groceries, and that's what they spend the money on. I said, they need different credit cards than you. And I'm trying to help their kids establish their credit. And a lot of people say, hey, you want to study abroad for, a summer in Barcelona, as part of their school program? He goes, get a credit card, have them get their own miles, have them start planning their own trip. So how do you start emancipating your children to be responsible? So I like to talk to these kids, and they're quite impressive, one-on-one, without their parents being a helicopter parent, to say, here's what we're treating. There's too many kids today that are treating their parents like an ATM machine.
True.
They just say, it's like, look, I want to go to Europe, I want to go here, I want to go to Las Vegas, or go to spring break, and it's like, well, then you should plan and you should figure out how to do that. So they can do that too. They can fly for free. They can also get lounge access. They can fly an economy premium. They can get upgraded. They just never even thought about it. So once they start thinking about it, then they have control over their own lives.
Sure.
So those are some of the things that I just advise people what they can do is that it's actually all possible.
And with your strategies that you have in place for both like your average person and also like your business owner, like how much does someone need to be spending a month to be traveling completely for free?
Well, the businesses, it's traveling like how much? So a lot of the people that I talk to, they go 2 directions. One group, they start traveling more. So they may have a family, they want to travel in economy class, and instead of going to South Carolina to visit their parents, then they can go 2 times a year. Other people, they're saying like, look, I want to fly in a higher class of service. A lot of people that work for these big companies, they used to get their status upgrades, used to fly first class. Now that's all gone because now they're an entrepreneur, but they still know what first class looks like. So I can help them get into first class, and to do that is like $10,000 a month in expenses. They can fly whenever they want in business class.
That's it.
Yeah, so
$10,000 a month.
And that's like And if you're a business, that's the optimal situation.
Yeah.
Because all of your business expenses can actually be done. Anything you're paying a credit card for, or an ACH or a check for, you can actually put on a credit card. That includes employees. My last company, we paid them through a credit card. We paid all the employees, the W-2 employees, through a credit card, so that we were getting hundreds and thousands or millions of points. And then people said there are fees associated with that.
That's
all
what I
those
was just
fees
asking about.
those fees are all tax deductible.
Yeah.
So when you pay your taxes with a credit card, it's like that's tax deductible. So there's a strategy and a timing when you do all these things to get optimal use of your points that then you can use for either one, lowering your company travel expenses. I got a company that you have 15 salespeople flying every month. They need 15 flights, 15 hotels, every quarter to kind of come in for a quarterly meeting. They're trying to lower their business travel cost because that goes right to the bottom line.
Yeah.
The other partners, the management team says, look, I don't care about the rest of the 40 employees. I care about our management team. So let's accumulate all those points so our families can travel in business class so we can take our vacations. And some owners say, I just care about myself and my family. So we help out all these different groups or what they want to do depending on their goals.
Yeah, I want to backpedal a little bit just because I think people need to understand the math a little bit more. Like you say, those fees are tax deductible, but then what is that like math breakdown, if that makes sense? So it's like those fees, obviously it's like tax deductible, but then how many points are you generating from that? And like what's like the dollar amount for that versus like the fees that you're paying?
Okay, so
if that makes sense.
So here's an example. Okay, so one client asked me that exact question.
Yep.
And I said, okay. I said, you got a tax bill coming up? He said, yes, I got a $30,000 tax bill. And I said, I think you should put it all on credit card. He started screaming. He said, that's going to cost me probably like $600 to $700 in fees, to pay the U.S. government, by credit card instead of writing a check and ACH right to the bank. And I said, and he argued me, he goes, why would I do that? He goes, well, if you do this, you're going to get about 500,000 frequent flyer points. Then he goes, how much is that worth? 500,000 points. I said, well, if you flew in business class, it's probably worth about, $35,000. So let me get this straight. I'm spending $600 and you're telling me I'm going to get $30,000 in value if I fly business class. And that's what you want, right? And he goes, yeah. He goes, oh yeah, and that $600, that's tax deductible. Okay. So the math works out, but then it's like the key is that, to have a strategy about who opens up credit cards, when you do, how many credit cards you want to have, when do you start cycling them off and closing credit cards? There's a whole strategy about that. And it's like, okay, so open up a credit card a couple of days or a couple of weeks before you do your quarterly taxes or your annual taxes, because you're going to have a big bill. So use that, but do all your spending to get on the minimum spend. Once you get past the minimum spend, plus any annual fees that are up front, then you get the points. So once you have the points, and then that's when you don't pay for things out of pocket like airfare and so on, because most people, they'll suffer an economy when they don't have to.
Yeah. It's pretty crazy how we're just trapped to the knowledge and the frameworks that we accept as like our underlying beliefs, where it's like we're taught like those like financial things like from a young age in school is like only open up one credit card.
It's a lot is to undo the myths that people have. And another one is you have to fly a lot to get status. And also it's like you have to fly a lot I don't fly enough to earn frequent flyer points, and that's crazy. It's like 82% of all frequent flyer points are earned by everyday spending by going to Home Depot, and groceries. They're not done by flying, but if you have a trip you want to plan, it is completely possible to use that on points. There's a lot of programs out there that show you how to find the points. So one is you have to accumulate the points. How do you search for airfare? And what points to actually spend? So they said that 82% of American Express points go to Delta. And that's the worst airline to transfer your American Express points to, yes.
Okay.
And because that's the only one people recognize as a U.S. carrier. They don't think about Air France, which you can book a flight on Delta for half the price, or Virgin Atlantic, so you can just get some insane values. by transfers, but nobody knows about these foreign carriers because they're all part of these different consolidations. So I help educate people to understand the value of the points that they have. And then I talk to the credit card companies and about which cards are more valuable, but it's never the one you think. Spending United miles on United is the worst way to spend United miles on United. They're better value spending on other airlines, and there's other airlines better spending on United to get the same flight, same seat, same Polaris class seat to flying business class to Europe, but you can spend half the price.
Yeah.
So most people don't realize that, or they never think about it.
Mm-hmm.
And
so for a sales rep that's looking to go through and like start their own business, it's pretty realistic that they could go through and start traveling wherever they want within a few months. I
think that one of the travesties is that if you're going to make the big leap to start your own entrepreneurial business, is to not stop and think about it first. The other thing is, of course, I'm all about family and taking care of the family. It's like, that your vacations and the time you spend with your family is important for the success of your business. Mm-hmm. So I'm saying that if you take the credit cards and you spend it in a certain way, you're going to take care of that expense and also lower your company expense during the infancy of your company. Mm-hmm. So it's smart to do this. You don't want to get in front of your skis by overspending, but there is a strategy about opening up credit cards to support your business. But then the question is, why do you want those points? A lot of people, they want to get like a 2% card because they said, oh yeah, for $1,000, I get $20 back. Mm-hmm. Well, $20 is not going to get you to Europe, So I'm saying that I there's reasons to have cash back, but it's the bigger bang for your buck is if you're spending it on flights or travel, and that's is to improve your quality of life as you're starting your new business.
Yeah, and it's possible.
It's all possible.
It's all possible. Just to wrap it up, if you had to go back to your 20-year-old self and give yourself like one piece of advice, what would that be? It
goes back to the fear of taking the leap, and one thing that I spent a lot of time in the media and entertainment industry of these different companies is because I didn't value my own skills. And so I felt that other people were interested in working with me because I knew a lot about media and entertainment. And I said if I went outside my industry, that it would that it wouldn't go well, or that I wouldn't have the same connections and the same people that I used to deal with at that level that I used to deal with them. And so finally I had a catalyst that helped me make the leap. It was like a frog jumping onto a stepping stone, and then I just can't tell you how liberating it was to say, okay, I'm going to forget the past, But then it's true is your skills are carried with you. How you communicate with other people, your integrity, all these things are what people care about across all industries. So I would have actually taken the leap sooner and gone into other things that I enjoyed more, as opposed to, just working to make money, mm-hmm. And doing stuff and traveling just because I thought I had to. And then I took more control of my life, and I'm a much happier person for it.
Yeah.
So I would have done it sooner.
Take the leap sooner and believe in yourself.
Believe in yourself. So it's like you just think that every 2 weeks when you get a paycheck from your company, have you learned everything at your company you can actually learn? And then if you say, yes, there's no more for me to learn, and then you're not investing in yourself anymore. That may be a time for you to look for another opportunity. It's going to launch you in different areas that may be much more rewarding for you.
Definitely. Well, thank you for being on, Roger.
Thank you very much for the interview.
If you're a sales rep looking to make the transition to get the freedom sales will never give you, please go to Rep2Owner.com. Join our community there, and we'll teach you all these different strategies that we just went over with Roger. God bless, and we'll see you on the next episode.